Okay. My name is Rita, and this is my PowerPoint on Snow White with the Seventh Dwarf and the Huntsman being my stories. I'm also going to do a brief overview of the Grimm brothers because we had one of our classmates drop out from this group. So for the Grimm's brother overview, the evil queen is Snow White's mother, and the queen gets jealous of her daughter's beauty, and that kind of drives the queen to hate Snow White. When the evil queen sends the huntsman out into the woods, he pities her because she's so beautiful, she shouldn't die like this. So the Snow White says, okay, I'll just run into the woods and never come back. And she does so. When she's running into the woods, she stumbles upon the dwarves' house. The dwarves let her in. Well, she kind of walks in, and then they kind of let her stay with a set of rules. Just cleaning house, like keeping everything the way it should be. While she's there, she goes under 3 trials from her mother. The first being the corset laced too tight, which kills her, which the dwarves bring her back to life by loosening the corset. The second trial is the comb. Third trial is the apple. Not really specific on who's saving Snow White or who finds her dead, but those are the trials. The prince couldn't live without the beautiful girl. Oh yeah, so the prince stumbles into their house and finds this beautiful woman laying in a coffin and was like, I need her. So the prince persuades the dwarves to let him have the coffin and has her with him all the time. Through every room, every meeting, everywhere. Someone's always carrying her from room to room. And one of the coffin carriers kind of gets fed up and starts messing with Snow White's corpse, and in the process shoves the apple out of her throat, which brings her back to life. After that happens, the prince marries her immediately, not even wanting to know anything more about her, just on her beauty, marries her, and then gets revenge from the evil queen by making her dance to her death in iron hot shoes, or shoes that were put in the fire and put on her feet. Now, for my 2 stories, The Huntsman and the Seventh Dwarf. The Huntsman is a second-person point of view and is in response to the 1933 Polly Klaas kidnapping and killing. In that story, or in that case, Richard Davis killed Polly Klaas by walking into her bedroom when Polly was having a sleepover with 2 of her friends. Davis walked into Polly's bedroom, told all of them to be quiet, and bound everyone together, so they couldn't move, and then took Polly and promptly killed her and buried her. In the Grimm's version of the Snow White story, the huntsman did not kill Snow White, where in this huntsman's story he did. So, victim or attacker, in the Grimm's version, the huntsman is kind of a victim because he was trying to do his job, but it was morally wrong, and brought back the boar's lungs and liver, where in the Birch huntsman's version, he actually did follow through with his killing, which made him an attacker. So there's that division between the 2 stories. Moving on to the Seventh Dwarf, it is a first-person point of view, and it's kind of the story of how the Seventh Dwarf fell in love with Snow White. Kind of it's not really secretive, but it's his personal story, his personal rendition of what was happening, and how he never really got credit for any of that. He was the one who would fix her mistakes, how she wouldn't sweep the corners when she would sweep, or silly things like that. And at the same time, he's also the one who found the comb in her hair, that the corset was too tight, and he was the one that made the coffin carriers stumble, and that inevitably led to the apple coming out of her throat. So he saved her 3 times with no credit. No one even noticed he was there. And now that in that story, Snow White went off and married the prince, and the 7th dwarf was just kind of left there to sit, and with no credit, with no anything, just his memories. So yeah, that's this kind of overview of it. Issues. Okay, so kind of the overall question is, when do we stop following? There's an obedience thing here, but when do we stop following? So our prince, this is related to the Grimms and the, the 7th dwarf story. They're both very cookie cutter princes, like, charming prince swoops in, gets the girl, saves the day kind of thing. He is the face, he is the popular guy, he's the one that everyone notices, where someone like the dwarf isn't going to get noticed as much. He's going to be in the background. He could be doing a lot, but we wouldn't know. And then we have our huntsman, and he is kind of our odd one, because we have the Grimm story, and then we have the Birch story. So in the Grimm's version, the huntsman kind of has that, like, I shouldn't be killing her. She's beautiful. I'm gonna spare her. She's too pretty to kill. Where in the Birch's story, he doesn't care about that. He just wants the little girl and kills her, and then it's kind of like, oh, what do I do next? What's next? Doesn't bat an eye at the fact, which, that's an issue there. That's an issue. Where do we stop following the orders? For the Birch version, Davis said that he was following voices in his head. He heard voices, but that was for not particularly Polly Class's case. It was for a girl before him, but who knows? Maybe there were voices contributing to that killing, that case, but we can't really know for sure with him. For the next slide, male gender roles in Snow White, the huntsman or the prince. So who is more in the mold? The prince is much more in his little mold. The huntsman story, like, the huntsman is a hunter. He's meant to go out, he's meant to hunt, where the evil queen kind of takes him away from that and says just to kill. He would be used to killing, but not humans. He would kill deer and boars and stuff like that. So for the prince, he is a cookie cutter. He is a prince. He is doing his job. He is very much playing the prince role, where the huntsman in both cases aren't being a huntsman. They are being a hitman. They're followers. They're just doing what they're told. In the Grimm's version, obviously, he has that moral difference, but for the huntsman's story, he goes through with the killing, which isn't right. Who's more impressionable? Obviously, I would say that the huntsman makes a better impression on me, but this is more of a discussion question. And who's the most flat? Again, a discussion question. I feel everyone would be a little bit more towards the prince, but I would love to hear if someone had an argument towards the huntsman. And then on the side, we kind of have our obedient, moral huntsman, the charming, lustful prince, and the lovable, forgettable 7th dwarf. So all of those can be played into who's most impressionable and who's the flat character. But again, that's more of a discussion thing. And last but not least, the morals and classes. So the morals, the huntsman, he is a hunter but won't kill Snow White. So yeah, the 7th dwarf is a big influencer, yet gets little credit. Is he okay with that? In mythology, dwarves are seen as greedy, they're hardworking, they're strong and they're always wanting to do something, but they're very like centered around themselves and the things they acquire, the shiny things, the gold, the jewels, whatever it is. So would he be okay as a dwarf not having that credit, not having that, look at me? Now, there are friendly dwarves like in the movie Snow White, but should we look at the Snow White version or should we look at the mythology version of a dwarf? That, again, is a discussion question. The prince is one-track minded. Is he morally flat? Does he follow? Does he lead? Or does he just fit his mold? Oh, excuse me, I had breakfast before this. Personally, I think he's just fitting his mold. He's not really following anything. He's not really leading anyone. Princes are supposed to be like great knights and stuff like that, but we don't really see his authority. We see his servants following him, but we don't see him having any great impact. So I would say he just fits his princely mold. I had little air quotes there, but you couldn't see me. Class. The huntsman would fit into the middle class. The queen knows of him and has him do her bidding. Oh yeah, I remember. So for that, the queen would be seen as a high class, like noble, whatever top tier is, where the huntsman would be below her. The queen still knows of the huntsman and picked him out. I bet there's a whole crew of huntsmen, but he picked her, or she picked him to go out and do what she needed besides doing it herself. That's like nobles won't do things themselves. They have under people to do it. So, yeah. But the huntsman is above a dwarf. Dwarf is very much lower class. He's doing the grunt work. He's the miner. And he's living with his 7 brothers. Like, you don't live in a big group. You live with yourself, your spouse, or your children. That's what it was. You didn't even sleep in the same room, where the 7 dwarfs are all sleeping in the same. They only have the 1-room house. So they're obviously of a lower class. And then we have the prince, who is a higher class person, similar to the queen, right alongside the queen. He lives to take over the throne with his perfect girl, or just a girl in general. For Snow White, he has to find the most beautiful, out of everybody, the most beautiful person. But, so that's the prince's role. Again, very cookie cutter, take the place of the throne with the girl. And, yeah, that's it. So, I hope this turns out good. And, yeah, we'll talk on Monday. Bye.